Vaporwave News Network, Episode 15.
Hello, and welcome to the Vaporwave News Network, a podcast about the contemporary vaporwave scene. We feature news, discussions, and current trends, as well as reporting on releases and events in the vaporwave, future funk, and adjacent communities. I'm your host, Alex, aka Trucks Passing Trucks. I run Pacific Plaza Records in addition to DJing and booking events over my past 7 years of being involved in the vaporwave community. Welcome to Vaporwave News Network. It's episode 15, covering March 2024, over 12 years since the start of this music genre and art movement. Spring has sprung and there's a lot of new stuff popping up in the vapor sphere, but before I get to that, let me remind you that you can check out our new website, vaporwavenewsnetwork.com, where we have articles, reviews, and all our graphics from each episode of the show. If you click on support the show or subscribe, you can get added to our email newsletter or become a paid member to get exclusive content and financially support the show. You can also follow the podcast on social media at VW News Network. We're currently on Instagram and Twitter, plus we have a TikTok and a Blue Sky account, so please follow us and comment on our posts to help drive that engagement. If you join us on Blue Sky, there are 2 great custom feeds created by Ognos that feature artists, musicians, and people involved in the vaporwave scene. The feed also catches all posts mentioning vaporwave in the past 7 days. There's been a lot more activity lately, and you don't need an invite anymore, so come join us on Blue Sky. We also have 2 curated playlists on Spotify that you can check out. Contemporary Vaporwave, which is our main playlist capturing all things vaporwave, future funk, as well as the beloved subgenres like slushwave, barber beats, late night lo-fi, vapor trap, and of course classic style. And we have Fresh Future Funk, which is loaded with current tracks from the past 6 months and a couple classics or deep cuts from the past. I added new selections to both playlists recently. Quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast or follow us on your platform of choice. If you're checking this out on YouTube, remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. If you can leave a rating on your streaming platform of choice, please do that as well. If you're listening on Spotify Mobile, scroll down in the description and you can interact with our polls and Q&A. And like I said earlier, if you want to support the show, you can head over to our website, vaporwavenewsnetwork.com, and become a member or associate producer. A big thank you to our associate producer supporters, Mackie and Joe B. If you'd like to join them in supporting the Vaporwave News Network, you can join them in the associate producer tier for only $10 a month. If you only want to donate $5 and get access to exclusive content, like our bonus Vaporwave history article I put out for March, there's also the members tier. And even if you can't financially support the show, you can sign up for the free tier so you get an email notification every time a new episode or feature article comes out. Once again, big thank you to everyone who's checked out the website and given me feedback on it. Don't forget, if you're a member, you can comment on the posts on our website, and you can access some exclusive content like the research interviews I did with Luxury Elite and Keith Rankin, plus the recent Vapor History article. With all that out of the way, what's been going on with me? Well, if you caught my belated February history post on Instagram, I've been going through some big changes and dealing with getting sick multiple times so far this year. I mean, for a while it seemed like I was catching a cold and recovering like every other week starting in mid-January. And then I also started apartment hunting with my partner in February, and man, like, rental stuff is a shit show out here in Orange County. Not only is it expensive, obviously it's like a high cost of living area, but the listings for the low end of the market are filled with like tons of scams and inaccurate listings. I mean, we were lucky to find something, and we've now kind of finished moving in, including all my label and podcasting stuff. I got my AV shelf stocked with a VCR DVD combo player, tape deck, top-loading CD player, and a chonky surround sound amplifier receiver to route it all. Nothing fancy in terms of gear, but I did christen it all with a viewing of Luxury Elite's High Society VHS, the one put out by Broadway Tapes a few years ago. It was awesome. Anyway, what am I going to recommend this week? Well, this week I'm going to recommend something a bit off the beaten path for Vaporwave, but something that connects to my personal history with sampling. Paul Simon's 1986 album, Graceland. If you only associate Paul Simon as one half of the folk crooners, Simon and Garfunkel, his solo discography is well worth checking out. He does have some songs in that Simon and Garfunkel style, but he also dabbles in much more funky genres, elements of decade-appropriate pop and world music, gospel, all sorts of cool things. But the Graceland album was Paul's foray into African music, and he actually went to South Africa during the era of apartheid and boycotts to write and record parts of the album with Ladysmith Black Mambazo
and other artists down there. It's quite eclectic compared to what you would usually expect from the New York Troubadour, and it's well worth the time to listen to these variety of styles, from men's choir acapellas to high-life twang, as well as zydeco accordion, backwards bass solos, and township jive afropop. If you listen to the song Crazy Love Volume 2, you can even hear where Vampire Weekend ripped their early sound from. Now, funny enough, I unknowingly encountered parts of this album as a teenager through samples. One of my favorite 2000s indie pop artists was Swedish songwriter and samplist Jens Lekman. His early singles and EPs were littered with sampled beats, sampled orchestral strings, and even Baroque pop elements from groups like The Left Bank. Lekman had also sampled stuff from Graceland and other 70s soul groups that I was in love with in college. As my music taste broadened, I realized how much Jens Lekman's catalog was graced by these unlicensed samples. In fact, so many that he had to remove multiple early albums and compilations of his from streaming services once the streaming era took over. The original version of his album, Nights Over Cortadala, has amazing sample work, and Jens was probably one of my first exposures to non-electronic musicians or bands making music heavily indebted to samples. So I highly recommend the album I just mentioned,
Night Falls Over Cortadala by Jens Lekman, and Graceland by Paul Simon.
Wrapping it up here, I was part of 2 events in March. I did visuals for the live stream benefit by Nostalgia Lounge called Sanctuary Live on the 31st. I was doing visuals for Majestic 12, and I think that set should be uploaded by the time this episode's live. I don't know. But I was also in San Diego on March 24th for Sweat.biz with our special guests Squiggle and Liminal Lamb. Shouts out to Chris and Shayna. They've been coming out to our gigs for a couple years, and it was great to have them guest DJ with us. Hopefully the next Sweat.biz will be announced soon. I'm thinking it's going to be in May. Not quite sure yet. But I'm also playing a set at the upcoming Vaporwave livestream show hosted by Quiz and Hot Takes, which is a benefit for children in Gaza. That one's going to be on April 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Hot Takes Twitch channel. If you're doing a streaming event and need a DJ set or someone to do visuals, please get in touch. I'm also available to do IRL gigs in other states since my current job is flexible and I love to get out. You can get in contact with me through my DJ Instagram at TrucksPassingTrucks or through the Pacific Plaza social media handles or, I don't know, even the Vaporwave News Network stuff. Whatever works. Now, on to the show. So what's happened in the Vaporwave scene the past month or two? Well, we had shows in Denver, Phoenix, New York City, Lima, Peru, Toronto, Los Angeles, San Diego, Columbus, Ohio, and more. Looking forward in the new year, there are lots of promoters kicking back into gear, throwing festivals, and some tours that are going to be coming up this summer. Remember, you can keep up with the calendar of upcoming shows and streams over at our friend's website, arcology.online/events. What's been going on in the URL space for the month of March? We had Sanctuary Live, that was the big one I mentioned earlier, with 2 days of music and visuals, including some from me during the Majestic 12 set. They raised over $1,600 for Trans Ohio and brought some joy and humor in these dark times for us and our gender non-conforming friends, especially here in America. Headless Blood Idol hosted a community group show on Twitch back on March 9th with tons of names, including some Vapor folks. And Luxury Aesthetics Virtual Gallery with DJ Non had a new episode called Circadium Solarium back on March 6th. Hot Takes has been on hiatus, but they're going to be back later this spring, and they have a compilation coming out on their Bandcamp page. Luxury Elites Neon Nights has also been on hiatus the past month, but it's returning in early April as well. VSTV, aka Virtual Synth TV, presented by Stratford Court and Dreamlink Records, was initially supposed to be in mid-March, but it ended up getting broadcast April 6th due to Andrew from Stratford Court having a baby. Congratulations, Andrew. And Big Baby Prophet is still streaming all vinyl DJ sets, which you can catch on YouTube every Wednesday night. Plus, he played a live gig back in March in Denver. On the podcast front, Future Sounds UK did an interview with Groove Remote in the first quarter of 2024, and just recently dropped a chat with Future Funk producer Snowdream on April 1st. Night Clerk Radio is back, and they're upping their pace of episode releases. They said that they're trying to dive into more new and current stuff, which you can see in their recent episodes reviewing Windows 98, Crystal Eternal, Magnetoscope, Platinum Towers, and when they were discussing the Utopia District Best of 2023 list. They've also been talking about some labels recently, too. The Assorted Vaporwave podcast had an episode in February interviewing GBA Flame, formerly known as Sonicon, and you can find them and their podcasts over on the Virtual Lounge 2 Bandcamp page. In other news, Pad Chennington released a new video on a well-worn topic, Barber Beats, and Soul Search and Destroy released a video on their second channel, Voyage, about the Vaporpop compilation that was released by my label, Pacific Plaza, back in 2021. It's titled Samples to Songwriting, How Vaporwave Found Its Voice, and it will also come up in our main topic later in the podcast. In the world of future funk on Spotify, Vantage's J-Funk City Edits compilation was taken down, and it's also disappeared from his Bandcamp. The Sendagi collection, which was a collab between Vantage and Macross, has also been removed from their Spotify and Bandcamps. Both of these releases are also gone from the Neon City Records Bandcamp, but I don't know, I wouldn't rule out a possibility of a reissue for the Sendagi collection, but I do wonder if the J-Funk City removal is due to legal liability or issues with licensing falling apart. I mean, Macross did reissue Jutsu, which has blatant samples, just like the songs on Idol's Sakura, which was also reissued recently. So I'm not sure why certain releases are going up and down, but hopefully we'll find out. On the Vaporwave side of things, notorious Broken Transmission and Climate Wave artist Asutanki deleted their music off Bandcamp, and folks on Reddit are speculating on if it's a temporary thing as well, or they're trying to figure out where to archive and collect all these releases. I should note that it is not the first time that this artist has done this for the Asutanki project and like numerous other aliases they've had over the years. But there's been a lot of different things coming down off Bandcamp and streaming services recently. OG Vaporwave artist Skeleton has also removed their music from Bandcamp and Spotify, but it is all backed up in archives. And if you're not aware of these archives, there's places like LOA 2K, which is Library of Alexandria 2K, which is the NeoCities website, and they put stuff on the Internet Archive. And then there's also the clone of the old Vaporwave library project, which is now hosted on vaporwave.ivan.mo. So that's vaporwave.ivan.moe. If you want to go check those out, you can find some lost, deleted, and historic Vaporwave albums. In other Plunderphonic news, The Hard Times dropped an article on Vaporwave, officially confirming that Vaporwave is indeed a punk, in air quotes, genre of music. Case closed. I won't say anything more about that. Just go read the article. And finally, it's the Bandcamp Beat. We're bringing up the latest updates related to the platform and the situation surrounding Songtrader's acquisition of Bandcamp. Unfortunately, when sorting by new releases on Discover when I'm on my desktop, the releases are still showing out of order. Honestly, I think the touted updates have had no appreciable impact for casual fans. I've not heard of any of these Discovery updates benefiting artists either. I mean, it'd be great if you could use the mobile app and sort the charts by more than just format and location, since best-selling always skews the charts towards old stuff, popular physical reissues, or things lumped in from discography purchases. I mean, there's still improvements Bandcamp can make, and they haven't, especially when it comes to the mobile app. But at least Bandcamp Daily is still cranking out articles, but you still can't access those in the mobile app either. Such a bummer. Yeah, at least the Bandcamp Daily stuff hasn't gotten worse, and the mobile app experience hasn't gotten worse either. Bandcamp Daily actually dropped a pretty significant article in February when it comes to Vaporwave. An article titled The Return of Vaporwave Pioneer Mediafired featured an interview with the Portuguese producer where he revealed some aliases, his thoughts on the early scene, and highlighted some tracks from his various catalogs. You can go check that out on the Bandcamp Daily website, not in the mobile app. Bandcamp Friday has continued, but it will not be monthly in the future. The dates for the remaining Bandcamp Fridays were announced, and they will be in May, September, October, and December, according to a post on Bandcamp Daily. Otherwise, things have been quiet from the Bandcamp Union, and Songtrader hasn't mentioned anything about Bandcamp either, though. Funny enough, if you go to the Songtrader website, over on their blog, they had 2 posts in March trying to sell their products to real estate agents. Wow, awesome stuff. Real estate agents, those people who've been really going through it lately with the NAR lawsuits and the messed up housing market. Oh, and a blog post about selling to franchise restaurant owners. Nice one, Songtrader. Good stuff. Upcoming shows and events. Okay, for April 2024, plus we have some festivals and summer announcements we're going to go over. In the URL space, as I mentioned before, there are some labels like Business Casual and others announcing listening parties on Bandcamp, so check the official Bandcamp homepage for live events and streams to see if there's any labels or vapor names you recognize over at bandcamp.com/live. The big one in April is going to be Vapor Aid, a live stream fest to benefit the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, which is hosted by Quiz and Hot Takes. It's going to be on April 27th at 3 p.m. It will be broadcast on the Hot Takes Twitch channel and feature a stacked lineup, including Luxury Elite, Young Shiro, Pad Chennington, Frank Javc, Fiber, Wizard of Loneliness, Disco Holic, Donor Lens, Skeleton Lipstick, Giant Claw, Saint Pepsi, and of course myself, Trucks Passing Trucks, and many others. Make sure you tune in. Luxury Elite's radio show Neon Nights returns on April 9th with episode 129 over on YouTube and a little bit more going on later in the month. Vapor Shave has been announced and will be presented by Daydream Deluxe and Utopia District on May 11th. They'll broadcast across both of their Twitch channels and raise money for research and treatment of people with blood cancer. In terms of IRL gigs for April 2024, we have George Clanton hitting the road across the central and eastern US for a tour that features Full Body 2 on the first half and Frost Children on the second half. It's running from April 2nd till April 26th. April 19th, Vapor Space STL will be hosting a show at Mighty Kind in St. Louis from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., loading on into 420. Visuals will be provided by Freaky Steve. In Los Angeles, Crystal Nostalgia will be back April 20th with special guest Nrail, Sinova, and James from DDS at High Tide Downtown LA. On April 21st, there'll be a show in Denver, Colorado at Complex 24 called Spring Dream featuring Luxury Noise, Charlou, Lunar Data Garden, Big Baby Prophet, Space Yeti, Astrid, and more. Yoitoki has also announced some April Future Funk parties, including Montreal on the 26th, and Toronto on the 27th, and Brooklyn on May 10th. Speaking of May 2024, on May 18th, there'll be a Future Funk event in Brooklyn with Englewood, Discoholic, Vape and Fiber at the Broadway. It's a 21-plus event. And to finish out the month, Yoitoki has also announced a show in San Francisco on May 31st. The first festival of the summer has been announced by Vapor VA. In Richmond, Virginia on June 1st, there'll be a fest at the Ember Music Hall called I2K, featuring headliners FM Skyline, White Woods, and Vape, plus a bunch of other artists from the Vaporwave and the Synthwave scene. Another fest was announced this summer, and it's on the weekend of June 28th. Gulfwave is an internet music festival and skate expo that will be in Bonita Springs, Florida. It's brought to you by Bosby and features 3 nights exploring the genre cosmos with a number of Vaporwave performers and regional artists. More info can be found on Eventbrite. If you have upcoming events that you want featured, please submit over at vaporwavenewsnetwork.com/submissions. In addition to my event submission form, we've partnered with the Arcology on a consolidated listing. You can get to their calendar by clicking on the events tab on our website, or you can go over to their website at arcology.online/events. If you said something through my submission form, make sure you submit over there on their website as well. Upcoming and current releases. I'm going to be doing 2 reviews this month, and then we'll move on to our long list of releases. So, for our first one. On March 30th, Barber Beats artist ROMBREAKER released his new album, Prisoners of Time. ROMBREAKER has been making Vaporwave for over half a decade, and 2 years ago pivoted to making original music after a string of successful albums in the first wave of what became known as Barber Beats, the fully sampled kind. Since his album Cold Mirror in March 2022, he's been making originally composed Barber Beats, and this new record is another strong entry in his vast catalog. The production feels like a step up from his previous album, with a tighter, less overwhelming low end, and more diverse song structures that feature a variety of textures. While a lot of composed vaporwave or chill synth sounds like it's painted on a flat canvas, these songs have a 3-dimensional quality and depth to them. It's like panning through a rendered landscape versus just watching a time-lapse video on a screen. Right from the outset, the gossamer pulsing synths draw you in, echoing over the twinkling toy pianos hiding in the background. On track 2, Things to Come, this feeling is enhanced by the slow flanger on the guitars and the stereophonic chiming percussion. Those plucked guitar-like sounds make a return on a few tracks, with some well-placed slide and glissandos that drip with emotion, especially on the final track, Come Back to Me. And to be clear, it's obviously a synth melody, but it has that plucked and slide quality of a stringed instrument, something more authentic and real. There's a humanistic touch to this album that isn't found in a lot of other composed vaporwave. Vocal samples are treated in a variety of ways, from poignant spoken dialogue to rhythmic layering, to lush pads and echoing melodies. The acoustic pianos not only add to this more natural, human touch to the album, but they also unify this collection of captivating songs, appearing on many different tracks. ROMBREAKER even throws in a drum and bass composition with ominous spoken dialogue,
over arpeggiating alarm-like synths. It fits nicely alongside the current wave of PlayStation breakbeats and atmospheric drum and bass. The next track, the penultimate track, changes up the rhythmic texture with motoric sidechain drums over rumbling sub-bass, showcasing the variety that this album has to offer. However, the artwork does feel a bit overwrought and cluttered with disparate elements that don't feel unified by the design. Personally, I'm not enthralled or moved by the human face dominating the frame, nor am I enthralled by the lack of cohesion scattered around the borders of that picture. It doesn't really reflect the musical quality of the album or add to the experience, despite the music being so fantastic and having really evocative track titles. The audio is detailed and polished with small flourishes that make this a complete statement, such as the field recordings on the opener or the wisp of strings at the conclusion of the final track. It's more cohesive sonically than most sampled Barber Beats albums, while still maintaining a diversity of texture that sets it apart from the retro synth world. Not content to be an amalgam of arranged loops, this dense and layered production highlights the holistic work ROMBREAKER has created on Prisoners of Time. You can check out the album on his Bandcamp or over on YouTube. And for this episode, I got a second review for y'all, making up for missing last month. drruumm, with 2 R's, 2 U's, and 2 M's, put out a new album called Antithesis on March 29th. It mixes the cyberpunk breakbeat sound with dreampunk and ambient aural palettes. It has a bit of breakcore flair in the artwork and in its noisy sonics, but the doomy and dreamy textures make it more akin to aggressive ambient music. The opening of the album bombards you before finally fracturing into discordant organ tones that sound like glass shattering in slow motion. These shorter songs at the beginning of the album are a bricolage of what's to come in the more fully fleshed out tracks on the second half of the album. But there's more percussive bombast in the beginning that grabs the listener. Moments of blitzkrieg contrasted with swirling synths and distorted or mangled audio, corrupting the harmony with dissonance. The title track is really the centerpiece of this album. It almost feels like a pop song with its reverberated vocal samples, epic build-ups, and soaring synth solo with tasteful drum layering. The B-side of this record brings us some more ambient synth pieces that provide respite for the listener, although that unease still creeps back in over the course of these much longer compositions than what we have on the A-side. The shifting moods recall the album artwork and its rose-tinted contrast of light and dark. Embodying the 2 figures on the cover, the musical harmony struggles between angelic lightness and washed-out waves of darkness. The album culminates with Selfishness, which harkens back to the ambient breakcore sound of the first half of the album, while cycling through the different sonic palettes from different tracks on the rest of it. It's a bit too long, despite trying its best to be a fitting conclusion that touches on a lot of the elements of this album that make it interesting. As a whole, Antithesis is a worthwhile listen for fans of breakcore, ambient jungle or D&B, as well as people who like darker flavored video game music of the late 90s and early 2000s. It's a stylistic change for drruumm, who's been making future funk the past few years, but if you go back and listen to their 2023 EP Cherish Me, you can hear some of these songs in their vestigial forms. According to the artist, the album took over a year to create, and the album signals a stylistic change for them, so go check it out on their Bandcamp or Spotify. Again, that's drruumm with 2 R's, 2 U's, and 2 M's, with their album, Antithesis. Getting into March releases, Donorleads finally released their new post-vapor breakbeat album, Rose Room, on My Pet Flamingo. It's got a couple collaborations with vocalists like Data Girl, Kira Pixie, Eulalie, and Jonna Tyrell, and it finds them pushing their music into zones of electronic art pop undergirded by nostalgic breaks. Windows 96 put out an album called 19999 that is a collection of tracks from the past. Quote, "A few minutes of each track on this album existed around the internet for a couple of years because of some weird distro leak. Here's the complete one," unquote. That's what it says on the Bandcamp release, and the first song is really vapory, and the whole album is a bit of a sampler of all the different sounds he's dabbled in, as one Bandcamp review notes. FM Skyline's new album Images is up for pre-order, and the second single called Motion Pictures was also released. You can check it out on his Bandcamp, Spotify, or the 100% Electronica website. Penthouse Suite put out a new album of Echo Jams, or sample vignettes as one Bandcamp review called them. It's very reminiscent of early Vapor, with nearly anonymous track names that all kind of flow together. Vanitas put out a new mini album of sample-free Vaporwave called, and I think I might butcher this, Vanitatum et Omnia Vanitas on March 13th. And Christ put out a new single called Boot Camp with a B-side called Disc Utility this month. In the future funk scene, Neon City Records put out an album by Aexion called Aesthetic Love, and they also put out an album by Desired side project Saturn Genesis called For Those Who, which features lo-fi hip-hop and chill-hop beats. Corespec Records released the compilation This Is Future Funk Volume 1, which aims to be an ongoing series of compilations that feature artists from the scene on an affordable 12-inch format. It offers 15 tracks by 15 artists, established producers and up-and-comers alike, that haven't been on vinyl before. The Nightfall Collective also released a compilation called Daybreak with 18 tracks in a cassette version plus a limited run of Nightfall t-shirts. Vantage put out a single from his side project, DJ 2001, which is a more Y2K and techno-oriented thing, although he did collaborate with this alias on his recent Neo Metro City album. Blip released a new album called Summer Tape with a 13-song track list and a whole host of collaborations. Some of the singles have been on our Fresh Future Funk playlist, including Pacific Highway, which was added recently. Manchester producer Gene Goro has put out a short release called the Ginger Cat EP over on their Bandcamp. On the Barber Beats front, Slower Pace put out a new album on their Bandcamp and YouTube. This one was called Pyromaniacs and has some retro video game box art aesthetics, kind of like Barbershop Simulator. Macro Blank put out a new album of Keygen style edits called Keygen Decided on YouTube and his Patreon. It has a strong VGM and 8-bit flavor with his classic laid-back beats. Oblique Occasions put out a new album in early March called Solipsism, exactly a month after their previous album, Quiet Despair. Makrech put out Of Stories Lost in Invisible Spaces on March 1st. Opal Vessel released a new album titled Let It Go, Dying Slow that was also released on cassette by Rabbit Hole Club. Savant Shadow released a new album on the 1st of March called Iconoclast. Abyssio put out an album in the vein of their previous releases like Sun-Colored Eyes called In Light of My Demons that features a Middle Eastern and Asiatic sound according to the description on Bandcamp. Barber Beats producer Gore released a new album that translates to Consume War on the 16th with some pretty visceral album art. Godspeed's album number 2, which translates to Inhibition of Glory, was released on double LP by My Putt Flamingo March 1st. Dark Desire put out a lengthy album called Fountain of Youth at the end of the month. Global Chill put out his first new release in a while with an album titled September 17th, 1986 over on his Bandcamp. For splits the past month, we also had Dirty River and M17 who put out a split called Evil Ego. Dirty River also put out 4 other releases in March, keeping up with their rapid pace. Undersaken has put out 8 albums in the past month and has already dropped a few for April. Canadian Barber Beats producer Known Artiste put out an album called Absent Waters on March 9th. Magnum Inominandum, what a name, put out a new album called Songs of the Red Nebula on March 8th, and one of the old albums was reissued on cassette by Rabbit Hole Club for Bandcamp Friday. Darkness put out 2 new releases that both have the same Bandcamp description. Majestic 12, who I did visuals for recently, put out a new album called Dream of Dreams on their Bandcamp March 11th. Producer Magdalene put out an album called Profaned, a mixtape of slowed, chopped, and screwed music from royalty-free websites. Mexican producer Permanent Zimp put out a new album on their Bandcamp called Analog, spelled the way people in the Commonwealth spell it, G-U-E. Middle MGMT put out a new down-tempo album of Barber Beats called Sabbatical at the beginning of the month. And Modest by Default put out the final part of their Raw Practices series, Volume 3, back in February. Renja put out a new breakbeat dream punk album called Ghost on their Bandcamp March 5th. Sorer from Lima, Peru put out a new album of ambient slushwave that translates to Dissolution this month. Baragol self-released some slushwave with an album title that translates to A Heart-Pounding Moment. They also have a cassette pre-order going on their Bandcamp. Hotel Shampoo put out a new lo-fi album called Roller Star with an actual symbol of a star in the title. Zero Ray put out Errant Hardware, an album of synth experiments on the Dirty Wave M8 that is also accompanied by a full visual album on YouTube. Shima33 released a new album on Dream Catalog called Transcende and released an album of deep dream punk edits on Spotify. Alias 404 put out a new album of vapor funk called Late Night, and earlier in the month put out an album called Moonlight. They also have a cassette release coming out on my label in April. Forest Kids Collective has a new album called Galileo Grandois up for pre-order on their Bandcamp. It comes out April 26th, and there's a few singles available to stream, plus physicals with designs by Zero Ray. OK Sure put out a new album on FT1% called All My Love to Give, with funky 80s synth pop vibes. And Stellar Dolphin Boulevard also released an EP on the same label this month called Channel Surfing. In terms of compilations, Pure Life released a compilation back in February that was a benefit for a venue local to them in England, a place where they put on shows over the past few years. Illclectic Beyond a Venue features 31 tracks from across the dream punk universe, and they donated the proceeds of the compilation to the crowd fund for the venue's relocation. Doki Doki Beats released the second edition of their Blood Sugar Beats comp with 3 different versions of physical media and the proceeds going to the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. It's got 61 tracks from a wide variety of artists. There was a Signal Wave compilation released by Underwater Computing called The Ultimate Sample Pack for Signal Wave Producers Volume 1 that had tracks from 16 artists, but the mini discs and cassettes are already sold out. I'm also going to mention this compilation again. Shatterfoil Industries, Global Pattern, Dream Shore Tapes, and Seaside Bliss came together back in February to release a benefit compilation for Palestinian children affected by the war in Gaza. All money goes to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. You can find it under the watermelon emoji if you search Bandcamp or go to any of the label's pages. Again, that's Shatterfoil Industries, Global Pattern, Dream Shore Tapes, or Seaside Bliss. On the net label front, Sunset Grid released some new albums by Blokebuster, yes, Blokebuster, Ident, R850, Notehead, and DJ Not Not. Bogus Collective released a bunch of new albums from artists like 818181, Hua Rang Boo, Pernoko, Ezra, Matthew Hayes, Slow Resync, Goosemane, and Suffocate. Photoshop Co. has released new albums, including stuff from PlayStation Platinum, 4 Departing 4, Knight Rider, and a split from Kiwi and Super Console 99, as well as a split from Bloody Mary and Polymono. Halcyon Tapes released a new album of Fruitager Arrow-inspired vaporwave called Borealis Industries by Mom and Dad's Computer on cassette. Virtua 94 put out an album by Dream Computer called SlimeMachine.exe and The River by Starmincer. Shatterfoil Industries reissued 3 albums from the artists Shafala, Aexion, and Diana Rhodes. Geometric Lullaby put out an album by Days of Blue Skies, formerly known as Days of Blue, called As the Days Go By, with artwork by Loonidus and sky-colored vinyl. No Problema Tapes put out some more reissues from Opal Vessel and physicals including vinyl for Modest by Default's Raw Practices Volume 1 and 2. Pure Life Tapes reissued some stuff on CD for March's Bandcamp Friday and released the benefit compilation I mentioned earlier back in February. Underwater Computing released the compilation I mentioned earlier as well, but they also put out a split from Babe, Fake, and Soar, 2 Peruvian artists. They also put out Peace of Mind, Tale of Hope by Moon of Sorrow, and a mysterious compilation of acid tracks called World of Acid, 24-bit extended remixes, curated by DJ Poseidon. Business Casual had 4 releases in March: Active Presence with their album Super Emo, Cryptologic Sludge with their album Biometric Profit Index, Barber Beats producer Midnight Driver with their Bossa Nova Beats album From Tokyo to Rio, and Laser Lohan with their album Neon Horizon. My label Pacific Plaza put out a second edition for PlayStation Jungle.psx by US Golf 95, but that one also sold out pretty quickly, so maybe we'll repress it again. We also have a Vaporfunk release by Alias 404 coming April 19th, and in May we have a new album from Luxury Noise called New Position. There's 2 singles from the album out now. If you have upcoming releases to send to us for coverage, head over to vaporwavenewsnetwork.com/submissions and use the upcoming release submission form. Okay, and on to our main topic for this episode. When I was brainstorming the topic, I noticed there's been a slew of albums recently, including some albums I reviewed earlier, that fall under the umbrella of sampleless vaporwave or originally composed vaporwave. While this isn't a new phenomenon, as I'll talk about later, it is still a contentious topic in the community. Can these types of artistic productions be considered vaporwave? Is there a threshold for how many original elements you can add before it's considered not vaporwave? Does the aesthetics, design, and conceptualization factor more into defining it as vaporwave? Does it have to emerge from a certain online milieu to be part of the vaporwave scene? Is vaporwave only a plunderphonic music genre, or is it something more? I won't be answering all these questions, and I'm sure people have different opinions about their answers. In fact, some of the answers to these questions may have changed over time, as the term and the genre has progressed through the 2010s. To debate or deeply investigate these arguments, it would take hours, and I'm sure discussions of sampleless or original vaporwave will continue ad infinitum. So I'm going to try and keep it brief, and I'm going to try and trace the history of this branch of the vaporwave family tree, and trace some of the discourse around it from the early days to the recent releases from some well-known artists. For vaporwave to fall in the sampleless or original composition category, it doesn't necessarily have to be made completely from scratch. A lot of producers in electronic music use loops from places like Splice, drum hits, and files of pre-made digital audio in their workflow. It's not uncommon. Some artists transform a sample so completely that it doesn't sound like the original waveform at all. Short samples, long samples, wholesale re-edits have all been well represented in previous episodes of our show during the Vaporwave History segment and in reviews. There's no singular way to sample audio in Vaporwave music, just as there's no single way people have sampled visual elements in Vaporwave artwork or videos. However, the type of audio sampling most commonly debated when it comes to Vaporwave is a bit more specific. The act of sampling a digital audio file or a piece of physical media converted to digital that is a pre-recorded piece of a musical composition or performance or pre-recorded audio from a video source. So that's the type of sampling we're going to be talking about today, not necessarily micro-sampling or people using pre-made samples or loops off of websites like Splice. So when I was researching this topic, I came across a piece written by Marvin Lin, aka Mr. P from Tiny Mixtapes, on the Walker Arts Center website from May 2015. When comparing the supposed demise of vaporwave and footwork, he noted, quote, "Vaporwave in its purest form was in fact just one among several permutations, and one that was described and idealized by critics themselves. Part of vaporwave's supposed death has to do with our inability to conceive of it as anything but a microgenre, without historical precedent or influence. So instead, its own narrative was made up, exaggerated, and then unceremoniously killed off, with critics ignoring the links that placed it in a rich continuum of art appropriation and cultural recontextualization." Unquote. That appropriation and recontextualization was explored in the early days of the genre and expanded on by people who have found new ways to engage with those two concepts. While sampling may have been an important way that was done in the beginning, and even in the current day scene, it is not the only way artists have engaged with hauntological ideas of memory, nostalgia, and technology in vaporwave. Starting at one of the genesis points for the genre, James Farrar's Farside Virtual, I'm going to quote an author I mentioned in our history segment about this album on episode 11 of the podcast, Liam Hoare. He wrote, "The album was completely composed entirely through GarageBand and utilizes common virtual sounds such as the Skype login sound, synthesized voices, elevator music, dated electronic sounds, soul-suckingly corporate music, and along with original MIDI instrument compositions. The editing tools of the DAW become an instrument themselves, conjuring new sounds out of old." Unquote. Much of the critical attention around Farside Virtual focused on Ferraro's composed sounds and how they differed from his previous work. While another pillar of vaporwave, Echo Jams by Chuck Persons, would serve as inspiration for the purely sample-based side of vaporwave, Farside Virtual contributed a different possibility for making vaporwave and blending original composition, samples, and hauntingly familiar sounds to the nascent music movement. Even artists like Vectroid explored the combination of samples, original instrumentation, and restructuring the work of other musicians on her early EP, Telnet Erotica,
with her flips on the Echo Jam Nobody Here and End of Life Entertainment Scenario Number 1. One of the more prominent artists making originally composed music in the early years of the Vaporwave movement was Eyeliner. He was even included in Adam Harper's follow-up to the notorious Vaporwave and the Pop Art of the Virtual Plaza article. Quote, Eyeliner's high fashion mood music, which I wrote about elsewhere, is in a similar vein to the Prism Corp releases, which were releases by Vectroid, in that it sounds like it was newly composed. Together with Prism Corp, and other stuff out there no doubt, it constitutes a substrain of Vaporwave, slightly away from the trance-inducing fogginess of the core sound on account of its higher detail and less repetitiousness, unquote. Even Eyeliner himself said it in an interview on Rate Your Music. Quote, when I began writing as Eyeliner, I felt like I was mentally occupying a space between the Computer Dreams album and James Ferraro's Far Side Virtual, unquote. There were other artists in the early scene that were making sampleless Vaporwave or moving from sampled to unsampled Vaporwave. Esprit, the original sample-based project of George Clan, hit the scene with his first releases in 2012 and 2013. But by the end of 2013, he tried his hand at making sample-free music with his iconic release Virtua.zip, which was released in May 2014. There's a great video by Chad Pennington discussing this album in an interview with George himself that I suggest you watch. On the Bandcamp, it says, this album is distinct in that it is comprised of all original compositions. Samples are utilized as a brushstroke rather than a canvas, unquote, like I mentioned in one of our previous history episodes. At the end of 2013, another Vaporwave artist, St. Pepsi, 6 months removed from the release of his iconic Hit Vibes album, released Local Singles, which was followed up in February 2014 by another EP, Gin City. These two EPs saw him experimenting with putting original instrumentation on top of his sampled work, as the press release for the vinyl reissues stated in 2023. St. Pepsi had been signed by Car Park in 2013 to make his next album, an album of original compositions, Prom King for the label. That album would come out in 2015, but meanwhile, an influential duo would be crafting a series of albums that would come to define sampleless Vaporwave, achieve critical success that brought more attention to the genre, and opened up new realms of subgenre differentiation within the scene. 2814 was a duo comprised of HKE, the founder and curator of Dream Catalog, and Telepath. The two started releasing music together in late 2014 with their self-titled album. However, it was their second album, Birth of a New Day, that caught the attention of not only folks in the underground, but publications like Rolling Stone, Tiny Mixtapes, Vice, and Resident Advisor. Prior to the release of the iconic album, HKE had already been praising the efforts of producers like Pyravid, whose Googleplex Bio Network was, quote, mostly original music with little bits of sampling, yet it is entirely Vaporwave in mood and feeling, as HKE said in an interview with the Red Bull Music Academy in September 2014. HKE even shouted out Esprit and Eyeliner in an interview on Tiny Mixtapes in October 2015. The work of 2814 really took the idea of originally composed Vaporwave to the next level, not to mention helped consolidate the dream punk movement, which took Vaporwave in a more cinematic and refined direction that was less reliant on samples of existing compositions or recording. The significance of this record also comes from the time it was released, a time when Vaporwave was having a resurgence of critical attention devoted to it, and trying to define it or boil it down into catchy headlines. As HKE said in a Tiny Mixtapes interview, quote, there was a consensus of thought at that time that I wanted to challenge, that Vaporwave had to be slowed down 80s music, otherwise it wasn't Vaporwave. I always viewed Vaporwave as a stylistic concept rather than a music genre defined by sonic properties, and I wanted to help bring that to attention, unquote. The idea of samples mixed with original instrumentation or reworked instrumentation recorded by the producer was fairly common as Vaporwave headed towards its 5-year anniversary. There were some albums by muso producers that attempted to bridge live instrumentation and sampling, bringing together different sides of their musical interests, like Daniel Saylor, formerly known as Windows 98, and his album Spring Rain, or back in the day with surfing. Albums of originally composed Vaporwave continued to flourish with artists like FM Skyline and Runners Club 95, who both hit the scene in 2017, Aogi Gahara Online, a side project of Dan Mason, who himself started to make sample-free Vaporwave going into the 2020s, and kind of helped coin the term Vaporwave 2.
There was also Windows 96 and many more in the mid-2010s who were starting to combine sampleless and sampled vaporwave or move towards completely sample-free vaporwave. Skipping forward a few years, the next milestone in sampleless vaporwave, and perhaps a general trend of known artists eschewing samples in their future work, was Cat System Corp and Telepath, who teamed up to create the album Building a Better World. It was released in July 2019 on Cat Corp's new label, Hiraeth Records, a label specifically to release originally composed music in the ambient, vaporwave, and cinematic experimental music genres. While both artists have been known for heavily sampling in the past and had released sample-heavy split albums together, the announcement of the release in the label was widely viewed as a shifting tide in the vapor waves and motivated other producers to rely less on samples or pivot towards original composition in their own future work, for creative and legal reasons. Around 2018 and 2019, we also saw 100% Electronica start to sign producers from the vaporwave community with an emphasis on those not using copyrighted samples, signing folks like Equip, Surfing, Vape Windows 98, Orograph, and FM Skyline, who I mentioned earlier, marked a new era for the label, along with its signature festival, Electronicon, that debuted in 2019. As the live music side of vaporwave began to blossom in 2019 and 2020, things ground to a halt with the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. There was an influx of streaming URL shows, and the pandemic brought many newcomers to the scene at a time when original compositions in vaporwave and sampleless works were on the rise. As YouTuber Soul Search and Destroy pointed out in their YouTube video, Samples to Songwriting, How Vaporwave Found Its Voice, quote, "With people sequestered to their computers, and online collaboration becomes de rigueur, the genre explodes and transforms in a way it hasn't before. Along with a boom in physical media, there's also a boom in new artists entering the genre, and the older, more established members inviting these new masses into the folds decide to blaze new trails." She also points out that with the isolation of the pandemic, there's a nostalgia and a longing for more human touches and humanness in vaporwave, which is reflected on the music of the Vapor Pop compilation, which the video does a great job of contextualizing. We also saw this humanness and nostalgia for connection, or in the case of live IRL shows, longing for the future that was stolen from the community, play out in the multitude of URL shows and streams, some of which included on-camera performances, face reveals, visual video art, and active audience chats. Even 100% Electronica, the label most known in the indie media world for representing contemporary vaporwave, got in on the action with their weekly Big Stream VR show that featured 360-degree VR immersive performances from the label artists, up-and-comers in the scene, and other experimental electronic musicians on the internet. As Soul Search and Destroy also mentioned in her video, quote, "The sample-based song structure certainly isn't going away, with artists such as Luxury Elite and Christ receiving critical acclaim in live venues. But this, vocals in vaporwave, opens the doors to vaporwave to continue to grow, to spread and proliferate as a genre, and encompass an even greater scope of sounds, times, and emotions for its ever-growing audience," unquote. I really recommend you go check out the video. It's on their second channel called Voyage with Soul Search and Destroy, and like I said, it's called Samples to Songwriting, How Vaporwave Found Its Voice. In just the past couple months, a number of records have come out that are sampleless or sample-light, with original composition and instrumentation taking center stage. Both of my reviews this month were in this vein, with one album going for originally composed songs that are a unique hybrid of styles, as well as an artist trying to compose in a set style to purposefully avoid samples, ironically trying to sound like the sample-based minimalist production of Barber Beats tracks. There's also been records from artists like Donor Lens, who try to put a British Y2K spin on vaporwave nostalgia and recontextualization with their new record Rose Room, as well as producers like Vanitas, who's released sample-free releases in a variety of subgenres. And looking back at our top records of 2023, Mindspring Memories and Desert Sand Feels Warm at Night had their album Desert Memories, which is a great example of new paths being blazed in the world of sample-free and originally composed vaporwave. You can check out our Best of 2023 podcast to hear more about the album, and I really recommend you listen to Desert Sand's interview on the Future Sounds podcast last year for more information about how they made that sample-free Slushwave album. Ultimately, I think we will see more original compositions in vaporwave, or at least people applying production techniques and recontextualizations from the genre on their own self-made works. if anything has become clear over the years, is that Vaporwave is more than just a single thing or made in just a singular way. As HKE said in an interview with Neon Vice back in January 2015, quote, "Sampling kitsch music is great and fun and absolutely a huge part of Vaporwave if applied in a meaningful manner, but it isn't the be-all end-all of the genre," unquote. With Vaporwave becoming more of an art movement and having localized creative communities, whether it's IRL meetups at events or digitally in new spaces like Discord and Twitch, the scope of Vaporwave has blossomed far beyond what the originators and proto-Vaporwave producers could have imagined. Whether it's making music that aspires to sound like the well-tread sample sources, or blazing new sonic trails inspired by the recontextualization of cultural signifiers, original composition and sample-free Vaporwave is here to stay and will continue to be a contentious point of discourse in the scene for years to come.
When it comes to time, we are prisoners.
Okay, this week in Vaporwave history. Well, since my whole main topic was basically history this month, I'm going to skip this section. If you're a paying supporter of the podcast, you can head over to our website and check out the bonus history article from March about SPF 420's South by Southwest showcase in 2014. If you would like to access that bonus history article, as well as other content like interviews and playlists, head over to vaporwavenewsnetwork.com and click on support to join today. You'll get all of our past content and email notifications whenever we post a new episode of the podcast or a feature article on our website. Okay, I hope everyone has enjoyed this week's episode of the Vaporwave News Network. Thank you to our supporters in the associate producer tier, Mackie and Joe B. Remember, you can also sign up to support the show for only $5 or $10 a month. We will have our usual stuff in the show notes, but make sure you sign up on our website to get our email newsletter every time a new episode of the podcast or feature article drops on the website. In addition to posting on our website, we also have an Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Twitter where we post highlight graphics and videos with releases and history mentioned in each episode. So make sure you give us a follow and repost the content. And please do repost it. Reposting the graphics and videos really helps spread the word to other people in the scene. You can find us on social media at VW News Network. If you would like to submit something to the show, check out vaporwavenewsnetwork.com/submissions to get access to our Google Forms for upcoming releases, events, and Spotify content. If you want to get in contact with us, you can also do it through our email, vaporwavenewsnetwork@gmail.com. This podcast is sponsored by Pacific Plaza, but if you are a reputable label or collective looking to advertise or sponsor the show, please get in contact. I've been your host, Alex, aka Trucks Passing Trucks. If you want to find me or my label on social media, you can look up Pacific Plaza Rec. That's Pacific Plaza REC on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. I also have an Instagram page for my music and DJing shenanigans over at Trucks Passing Trucks, all one word. If you want to book me for any gigs or streams in 2024, get in contact with me on social media. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you tune in to future episodes of the Vaporwave News Network. From our part of the Vapor world, this is Alex, signing off until next time.
Vaporwave News Network.